There is something in your garden that you have probably been meaning to get rid of. A strange patch of white foam clinging to a flower stem. A cluster of bubbles sitting on a blade of grass. A wet, frothy mass that seems completely out of place among the leaves and flowers you have spent months caring for. It looks messy. It looks unnatural. It looks like a problem waiting to be washed away. And if your first instinct has been to reach for a hose and remove it, stop. Because what is hiding inside that strange foam may be one of the most extraordinary things happening anywhere in your garden right now. And what will happen if you destroy it is something you may eventually regret. Today we are going to look inside that foam together. We are going to discover what is living there, who built it, why it exists, and why some of the most experienced gardeners and naturalists in America have made a deliberate decision to leave it exactly where they find it. But before we do that, I want you to think about something. Have you ever walked through your garden and assumed you already knew what you were looking at? A spider web, a patch of moss, a strange insect, a fungus growing on a branch. Most of us see something unusual and immediately decide whether it belongs there or not. Helpful or harmful, good or bad, leave it alone or remove it. Yet nature almost never works that way. Sometimes the things we fear the most are completely harmless, and sometimes the things we ignore are among the most important creatures in the entire ecosystem. Across America, millions of homeowners discover this strange white foam every spring and summer. It appears almost overnight. One day the plant looks perfectly healthy. The next day it seems covered in bubbles. Gardeners worry about disease. Homeowners worry about pests. Some people assume their plants are dying. Others scrape the foam away without ever asking what it is. But what if that foam is not harming your plant at all? What if it is actually protecting something? What if inside that white shelter there is a creature carrying out a survival strategy older than human civilization itself? Think about that for a moment. Somewhere in your garden right now, there may be a living structure built by an animal, smaller than a grain of rice, a structure designed to protect it from heat, protect it from predators, protect it from dehydration, protect it from a world filled with dangers. And perhaps the strangest part is that this tiny architect built the entire thing itself. Every bubble, every drop of moisture, every layer of foam, created for a purpose, created through a biological process so unusual that most people refuse to believe it the first time they hear about it. And the story becomes even stranger when you realize that this same process has been helping this species survive for millions of years, long before the first American town, long before the first farm, long before humans planted gardens at all. The truth is that the foam itself is not the organism. It is not a disease. It is not a fungus. It is not plant damage. It is something far more remarkable, a living shelter hiding one of the most misunderstood creatures in your entire yard. And once you understand what is actually happening inside that foam, you may never look at your garden the same way again. Let us start with something that very few people know. That strange white foam has a name, and the tiny creature hiding inside it may be one of the greatest survival experts you have never noticed. Let's start with who built it. That strange white foam in your garden was built by the immature stage of an insect known as a spittlebug. Across North America, dozens of species exist, but the ones most people encounter belong to a group of tiny sap-feeding insects related to leafhoppers and froghoppers. The first thing to understand about spittlebugs, and this is the part that surprises almost everyone, is that the foam is not waste. It is not slime. It is not a disease. It is not a sign that your plant is dying. The foam is a carefully engineered survival chamber. Every bubble has a purpose. Every drop of moisture serves a function. And the tiny creature inside depends on that structure for its life. But the story becomes stranger, because unlike a bird building a nest or a spider spinning a web, the spittlebug builds its shelter using materials produced by its own body. Imagine being no larger than a grain of rice. Imagine living in a world where birds, spiders, ants, parasitic wasps, and even sunlight can become a threat. How do you survive? The answer developed by this insect over millions of years is astonishing. It surrounds itself with foam. Scientists studying spittlebugs discovered that the insect feeds on plant sap and then mixes excess liquid with specialized secretions and tiny pockets of air. The result is the white, frothy structure you see on stems and leaves. At first glance, it looks simple, but in reality it functions like a miniature life support system. The foam keeps temperatures stable. It prevents dehydration during hot afternoons. It conceals the insect from predators. It even helps protect it from parasites searching for hosts. Think about that for a moment. Somewhere in your garden right now, a creature smaller than a grain of rice may be living inside a climate-controlled protective shelter that it built entirely by itself. Long before humans invented insulated homes, this insect was already using biological engineering to survive extreme conditions. And perhaps the strangest part is that most people destroy it without ever realizing what it is. But what exactly is hiding inside the foam? This is where the story becomes truly remarkable. If you carefully separate the bubbles, you will often find a pale green-yellow or cream-colored insect, soft-bodied, fragile-looking, almost defenseless. At least that is what it appears to be, because despite its tiny size, this insect belongs to a lineage that has survived for hundreds of millions of years. The ancestors of modern spittlebugs existed long before humans, long before mammals dominated the planet, long before many of the flowering plants in your garden evolved. Entire ecosystems rose and disappeared while their ancestors continued adapting. Ice ages came and went, continents changed shape, forests expanded and vanished. Yet these tiny insects survived, not through strength, not through speed, but through one of the most effective defensive systems nature ever produced, the foam itself. And the more scientists study that foam, the more impressive it becomes. Research has shown that temperatures inside the foam can remain significantly more stable than temperatures outside. Moisture levels stay higher, exposure to predators is dramatically reduced. Even harmful ultraviolet radiation is partially blocked. To a human, it looks like a blob of bubbles. To the insect, it is the difference between life and death. This is why removing the foam can be devastating. The moment the protective layer disappears, the insect becomes exposed to heat dehydration predators and environmental stress. Imagine removing the roof from a house during a storm. That is essentially what happens when someone scrapes away the foam. The shelter disappears instantly while the dangers remain. Yet there is another misconception that deserves attention. Many people believe spittlebugs are harming their plants. In reality, healthy plants rarely suffer meaningful damage from small populations. The insect feeds on sap, but most established plants tolerate this feeding with little consequence. The fear often comes from appearance rather than actual harm. We see something unusual and assume the worst, but nature rarely follows human assumptions. And once you understand what that foam really is, the question changes. Instead of asking, "Why is this strange foam on my plant?" you begin asking what incredible process is taking place inside it. But there is one final part of this story that deserves your attention. Because the question is no longer what is hiding inside the foam. The question is what that foam reveals about the world around us. Most people imagine gardens as places they control. We choose the plants, we pull the weeds, we water the soil, we decide what belongs and what does not. Yet the deeper you look, the more you realize that a garden is not a collection of plants. It is an ecosystem, a living network filled with relationships too small for most people to notice. Every leaf supports life. Every stem becomes shelter. Every patch of soil contains thousands of invisible stories unfolding at the same time. And hidden among those stories is a tiny insect living inside a structure made entirely from bubbles, a creature so small that most people never notice it, yet sophisticated enough to engineer its own survival chamber, protected by a design refined over millions of years of evolution. The strange foam on your plant is not an accident. It is not a mistake. It is not evidence that nature is failing. It is evidence that nature is working exactly as it was designed to work. The foam protects the insect. The insect survives. Predators search for food. Plants continue growing. Countless interactions take place quietly every day, whether humans notice them or not. And perhaps that is the most remarkable thing about all of this. The tiny creature inside that foam is not trying to attract attention. It is not trying to be admired. It is simply trying to survive. Yet in doing so, it demonstrates a level of biological ingenuity that most people never stop to appreciate. Somewhere in America right now, a homeowner is probably reaching toward a patch of white foam with the intention of washing it away. Somewhere, a gardener is assuming the plant has become diseased. Somewhere, a child is looking at the bubbles and wondering what could possibly be hiding inside. And now you know the answer. Not a disease, not a fungus, not a problem. A living shelter, a survival chamber, a tiny masterpiece of natural engineering. The foam on your plant is not a warning sign. It is a story that has been unfolding for millions of years on stems and leaves across North America, long before houses, long before gardens, long before humans ever noticed it. So what should you do the next time you find this strange foam in your garden? The answer is surprisingly simple. Leave it alone. Observe it if you're curious. Photograph it if you like. Show it to your children. But understand what you are looking at before you decide to destroy it, because once the foam disappears, the remarkable process happening inside disappears with it. The strange foam in your garden is not a problem. It is a solution, a tiny bubble-covered solution to challenges most living things could never survive. And the next time someone points at it and says something must be wrong with that plant, perhaps you can tell them what is really happening. Have you ever found this strange foam in your garden and wondered what it was? Tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one, and some of the most fascinating nature stories I have ever heard began with a simple observation in an ordinary backyard. And if you think a tiny insect living inside a bubble fortress is strange, wait until you discover the creature hiding beneath garden stones across America right now, because the next story may be even more surprising than this one.